Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the UnLearnT podcast. I am your host, Ruth Abigail, a.k.a. R.A.
What's up, friends? It's your girl, Jaquita.
And this is the podcast that is helping you to gain the courage to change your mind so that you can experience more freedom. And yes, we have a special guest, not her first time on the podcast. What's
special
up, Megan?
guest? Megan was like, when do I say my name? Do I say it now? Do I say it right now? I love
it. So good to be here. Love it.
Oh, yay. Okay, so we're excited. So like you all know, we're in kitchen table conversations, and so we invited Megan to join us for this one. And I'm just gonna kind of let her, because I am who I am. You know what I mean? Me and Megan have been friends for a long time.
She's so trifling.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very petty. This whole setup was very petty.
Yeah. I am who I am means I'm trifling. Go ahead, Megan. Tell them the story.
So I just get a text message and it's like, hey, me and Quita are doing this series. Like, we want you to be on the podcast, but you have to commit before I tell you what the topic is going to be. And I'm like, that sucks. Like, what am I signing up for? But you're my friend. So, like, that's just what we do. We say yes. And then she was like, okay, well, we're going to talk about race. And I was like, oh, yeah.
I would like to say, as a member of the UnLearnT podcast, I am not at all represented, okay, in the way that Ruth Abigail chose to approach poor Megan. Okay?
She mentioned, like, you're white. Me and Quita both know you, so like you're
crazy.
And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you both know like at least 2 white people, you know? Like, I know you know more than one. But then it made sense, like, maybe I'm the only one you guys know together who's, like, we've all spent time together, like, this
gets crazier and crazier. It gets crazier and crazier.
Just was like,
yeah.
I mean,
it's just getting worse and worse.
Mm-hmm. So
Ruth Abigail's like, yeah. I need a white.
Technically, I'm olive, and I don't subscribe to the white, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Everyone, that was a joke.
I'll do. It was a joke.
Hilarious.
Just kidding.
That is hilarious.
Yes. So
just teasing.
So yeah,
that's why we're here.
That's why we're here, guys. Welcome. All right. So we're going to tackle this issue of race. And yes, it is true. I did do that. Yes, it is true that Jaquita had nothing to do with it. So her name is totally cleared.
I did approve Megan though. I was like, oh yeah, Megan would be great.
She did. Yeah. She just didn't approve the way I did it. But
I thought she had a little more class.
I don't.
No,
I don't.
Not at all.
No, the goal was to get it done. Okay, got it done. She's here. There it is.
And here she is. Okay,
there it is. But in all seriousness, I do. This could be a tense topic. Mm-hmm. We know that. We realize that we're tackling something that is not often tackled, and when it is, not often tackled well. And so, I mean, it's true. Like, a lot of people don't know how to talk about race well. I mean, that's real. And a lot of times we don't talk about it with other people who have a different race. I mean, the reality, like, at least I don't know about y'all, but like on podcasts, I rarely, not that I haven't seen it all, but rarely see for people of different races on the same podcast at all, to be honest with you. And then talking about race on a podcast that isn't rooted in one educating the other. Right? This is not what this is.
Yeah.
We are not here to educate Megan on how to be a nice white person. That's not what this is about. And she is not here to educate us on anything. Like, we're here to have a conversation about what it was like for us growing up, like, and how we internalize this issue of race and how it's played out and like impacted us as we've gotten older. And the goal is not to stir up stuff, not to be upset, not to get like, we're not, but it really is to learn how to have these healthy, real, raw, tense, sometimes difficult, but can be very healing conversations. Right. And the whole goal of this and of the podcast is to help us change our minds. Like, so we got to change our minds about how we actually approach this topic. And Megan she is a great friend of mine. And, you know, I trust her and we really are. It's one of those things like when she calls me to do something, I don't ask many questions. The answer is probably going to be yes. And because we have a relationship. And I think like just opening up the conversation, like, you know, me, Meg, we were talking earlier, relationship is such a central key to this. I mean, we wouldn't be on this podcast together doing this if we didn't have a relationship.
Yeah.
No.
You know?
For sure.
So how has I'll just kind of open up the question, just like, you know, how has relationship played a role in your relations with your connections with different races growing up?
You want to go first?
Sure. So I grew up kind of in the military. My dad got in the military right before I was born. And so we kind of moved from state to state, and then we moved out the country. I started school in Germany, was over there for 4 years. And as we like kind of opened up this conversation, I was thinking about the first time I realized I was Black. And it was in the first grade. I was in the first grade at the time. My best friend, her name was Jenna. Okay. I don't know where you at, Jenna, but hey girl. But at the time, you know, first grade, my first best friend, her name was Jenna. And I had another best friend too. And Jenna was mixed. And then my other best friend, I can't really remember her name because it was first grade, but let's just call her Mariana because I think it was something close to that.
Wow.
But she was Hispanic. And that was my crew. Like when I went to school, it was me, Jenna, and Mariana. So sorry, Mariana. I know that's not your name. But we okay.
Best friend.
But anyways,
go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, it was first grade. I was 6.
Saying. I got it.
But I remember one day on the playground, you know, Jenna was very, very fair skinned. And I remember we used to play every day on the playground. I knew I was going to go outside and I was going to play with Jenna. Oh, that's why I don't remember her name. Baby left. She left in the middle of the year.
There you go.
Know, we didn't really get the bond.
There it is.
So it was me and Jenna for a while. And then one day I went to the playground and Jenna was hanging out with some white friends. And I was like, okay, so I guess I'm going to join this crew. And Jenna came up to me and she said, you know, Jaquita, we don't have to hang out all the time.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, oh, so I'm not good enough to hang with you and your new friends.
Oh, wow.
And that literally broke something in me because it made me feel like I was like, oh, I don't know that I can like in a real way have friendships with people from different races because I was good enough when she wanted to be friends, but I wasn't good enough when she wanted to hang out with her white friends. So eventually I found my Black friends. And they were like, hey, Quita, what's you doing? You know, they were like, you belong here. You know, like you were always supposed to be here. And so it took me a while to kind of like navigate through having relationships with different people because that really broke my heart at a young age. And it set a precedence that like when you go into, because as an Army kid, you were always in new situations. You know, like we moved back to the United States. I came back to school and I was like, okay, who's going to be my friends? And then immediately you start navigating toward people that look like you. But on the Army base, it wasn't like that until I had that experience.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, Quita. That's a new story. I didn't know that happened.
I feel like Joy knew that.
Wow. I don't know how to feel about that.
Because I feel like I told you the story and you just forgot it.
No, I've never heard that story. Not that. Yeah. No, I really haven't. Like, but that would be very defining. Like that's a very defining moment.
I mean, and this is not to say, I just want to clear the air. This is not to say that growing up, I didn't have friends from different races. I absolutely did. But I'm saying it put this natural inclination in me that saying you might get rejected.
Yeah.
Like a pause.
Yeah, like a pause, like, hey, am I cool enough for you?
Yeah.
Am I smart enough for you? I felt like I had to prove something in order to go into those other spaces. Whereas I felt more like I was there was already a place at the table for me at the Black table. You get what I'm saying? Whereas I felt like in approaching somebody else's table or approaching another group of people, I had to either prove that I was going to be like, you know, safe and acceptable. I had to be extra funny or I had to be extra smart. Like I had to find something that would make me click in that space.
Yeah. I grew up in a interesting situation. My school situation was I was the only Black kid in my class up to the 8th grade, and
Mm.
none of my teachers were Black. I just did, that's just not what that wasn't my education. So 5 days out the week, I was surrounded by white people. Like it was
Wow.
just a part of that was just how I grew up. And then on Sundays, I went to an all Black church, and so Sundays and Wednesdays and Sunday nights. So I mean, we were there. And so, but like I had a very my experience with another race was with white people specifically was because was at a private school. At that school, there was a lot of people of means and wealth. My understanding was white people are a lot of are I'm not going to say they all were this, but in my mind, just as a kid, white people are smart and white people are rich.
Yeah, but I think can I interrupt for a
Yeah, go
second?
ahead.
I think that's such a valuable statement of like as a kid, which is why it's so important, like to start having these conversations when kids are little, because they don't have
Yeah.
the ability to like abstract think. Like
Mm,
to
mm,
them, it is like, oh,
mm,
this is how I felt. This is what this meant.
mm.
And I think we like grow up just associating that like that's what that meant.
Yes.
Whether or not maybe someone actually meant for you to feel rejected or not, like that's besides the point. Like kids don't
Yeah.
have the ability to do deductive thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that is what's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you go about life like that. And like you said, you
Mm.
form philosophies around that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was like, all right, so I have to be I'm not. I mean, we're not wealthy. I can't do anything about that, but I could do something about being smart. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to be smart. And I think that was just it was something. Even if I'm saying it out loud, I don't know that I actually I could for sure know I was not conscious of that. Like, but in my mind, it was I have to perform academically at a level that makes it make sense that I'm here. You know,
Mm.
um, and my and what I'm grateful for is I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful that I had a balance in my life, where my church world and just my family were very affirming in you being Black is something to be proud of. This is our history. This is why. This is you and so I was affirmed in those ways. Grow all at the same time I was experiencing this other thing, and I think as a kid, because most of a child's life is within their academic space, that took precedent in my mind until I got older. You know what I mean? So like the things I was affirmed of in my home, at church, um, I didn't really internalize that deeply until I got older. And I got out of that and I began to experience until I got to college really. And like that's when everything shifted and I started to see the world from a different lens of like, oh shoot, like this is not what I thought it was. And I had to unlearn that I had to unlearn that what I was experiencing at home was the same as what I would experience when I left. Like that, it wasn't the same, and that's why I'm grateful for the counterbalance of my home and my church, because it gave me something I didn't know I needed when I left, and I had to stand on my own in a sea of other and difference that did not know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and so it did impact how I began my relationships. I had my relationships with my friends at school, which just because we were at school, like that was my, and they happened to be white. Like I didn't think anything of it. But when I went to college and I approached white people like I would have approached them in high school or in elementary school, where I grew up, it did not transfer. Like white folks did not accept me like that. Like I felt othered. And I was like, hold on, I've never felt like this. Like I never like felt that strong. And it redefined how I approach my relationships with white people.
Interesting.
If I'm being honest. Like that was
yeah.
It just redefined it. Because I was like, oh, got it. So that was my experience was like I mean, it truly wasn't a bubble. And now the bubble's burst and okay, cool. I didn't know. Now I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you?
It's interesting. I don't necessarily have, I mean, when I was little, I don't have any stories like that necessarily. I just remember, like race wasn't, it just wasn't a topic of conversation. I think the main conversation was just like you treat everyone the same, you don't see color, we all bleed the same. And I don't necessarily think that's bad information, but we just didn't, it was like if you said black, it's like, shh, don't say black. And you're like, okay, why can't I say black? You know? My elementary school and middle school, like I was probably, honestly, I think it was pretty equal diversity wise. I think that was the area I lived in. And it wasn't until I got to college that I was genuinely confused that like people I was eating dinner with didn't have black friends. Like that just didn't make sense to me. But while being in friendships with black people, I still had the mindset of like, we don't see color. Like, I don't know if I ever valued them for being black. It was just, you know, I was just there. I did in high school date a black guy, and we would go to some of his family's house. And I remember one time, I don't think this like, I don't know what the significance of it was in the moment, but I was like very aware of like the conversations that being had about white people behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And they just are a thing. Like, and I remember one time trying to bring a cake over to like one of the family functions, and it wasn't good. And I remember being made so much fun of.
Oh,
I'm so sorry. I
so
am so
much
sorry.
oh man.
Oh no.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh girl.
Oh
Oh
man.
child.
And so I think like the only way that really impacted me was like, oh, white people can't cook, really can't cook, and the seasoning like super bland. It did kind of pause. I didn't cook for a really long time. I'm just now kind of starting to explore cooking again. But you gotta just let it roll. You gotta let it roll off, though.
That's
you know,
great.
but
Listen,
it wasn't until I was like in homes of people that I realized like what conversations were actually happening. That definitely weren't happening in my household. If it wasn't for those experiences, I'm not sure I really would have understood the conversations in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Quita.
No, I think that's so interesting because I feel like you coming into black spaces where you're the other, like even though it was like, you know, like a cake, like there's still like this, okay, I now have to perform for this other side, or I have to show up in a way. Like I think, you know, one, it's a human need. Like everybody wants to feel accepted,
right?
You know, and we want to feel like we have a place in the spaces that we show up. But when we are our living spaces, I think that's so interesting because me and Ruth were talking about like educational spaces. But when you go into each other's homes, I'm like, I told somebody recently, I was like, and you know, just because we 100 on this podcast, I was like, I don't really know that I know what the inside of a white couple's home is like. Like, I don't know what the feel of it is like. Like, how do we talk to the kids? Is it like, hey, you better sit down somewhere? Or is it like, hey, Johnny?
Are we gentle parenting? I don't know. You know, like.
Child, no, the black people gentle parenting now too, honey. It's a mix. It's mixed out here for everybody. For everybody. Okay. Parenting is a whole nother bag right now. It is not what it was when we were growing up. But you know, like I don't know what like dinner conversations look like because I've never been invited into those spaces. And so when you don't get invited into those spaces, now granted in high school I did, but it was a white guy who had a lot of black friends, and so we all used to be over there. Shout out to Michael. But he was anyways, that's neither here nor there. But I don't have a lot of context for what's happening in intimate spaces with white people. And so that's something but it's something that I'm like curious about. Like it's something that I'm like, I feel like we could build better relationships with each other if there were more invitations into vulnerable spaces.
That's really
invitations to the cookout, if you will.
Yeah.
Like you need to be in those vulnerable spaces in order for there to ever be a bridge, because without that, we're all just playing in the, like when you're not really yourself when you step outside your house. You are putting on some type of performance. When I go to work, I'm giving them, hey guys, how was your weekend?
I'll be on the phone. I'll be on the phone with Quita when she be walking in sometimes to
Don't
work.
Do it.
And I tell you, boy, that's that flip, boy. That flip. She be flipping.
We all do it. We all do
it. First of all, I'm friendly. That's because I'm friendly. I'm friends with you, but I'm friendly, okay, with my work people.
Now, you ain't
so
lying.
I talk to them in a friendly voice. You get whatever comes out.
I don't get friendly. That ain't what we. It's so. But to your point though, the flip is so quick. It's a natural, because you're right. We perform. I mean, we're performing outside of our house. Like, that's real.
Yeah. The space you're walking into is going to dictate how you interact with it.
Yes.
Right. Like, I don't even think about it. I walk into that space and I'm like, oh yeah, this worked, Jaquita. I'm wondering, like, if we had friends, more diverse friends that we were spending more intimate time with, could we start taking off some of these faces?
Yeah.
And some stuff, like, I think some stuff has to be approached with some lightheartedness, like, I think it's okay to say that, like, white people season differently than Black people. Like, we don't accept all stereotypes,
it's a true
but there
fact.
are, like, sometimes that's really true,
It's pretty true.
It's not just a stereotype.
Right. And like vulnerabilities, nobody just wants to be wrong and be embarrassed. So it's like, if you can just be okay with, like, maybe I did say the wrong thing. I think the art of, like, reconciling something is lost a little. It's like, if I offended you or if I said something that wasn't okay, like, please tell me. And then also, like, just make it right. But we don't, like, the conflict is such a, like, that's a hard thing for people, and people want to avoid it and they don't want to deal with it. But real healing comes from when you have hard conversations and there's a resolve at the end of it.
Yes.
And you're like, girl, man, it really wasn't that bad. It's just bigger in our heads for good reason. Like, social media and the media, like, it makes it almost impossible to want to even attempt to do something hard. And I'm not even talking about just white and Black people having conversations. Like, there's a lot of pressure, but there is, dealing with conflict is like just a lost art.
Yeah, I think I just want to go back to something you were saying earlier. Well, both of y'all, which is what, bringing up the intimate space piece and just like being in each other's vulnerable spaces or intimate spaces. And Megan, I think it's a great point what you made, Quita, is like the experience of being in a home, and that, which is different than being in, educational environments. It's very different, right? And so, or church, like it's very different. And so I think that no, where'd it go? No.
Welcome to middle adult,
people.
No. Welcome to middle adult. The thought left. It'll circle the block. It'll spin the block.
It's gonna spin the block. No. It is. But I think my overarching point was how there it was. I got it. So in those spaces, you were saying, Megan, you noticed, you recognized, we don't talk about Black people the way Black people talk about white people in their homes. And it's really, I think that's so interesting. It's like, no, we don't talk about that. Versus, I in my home, we talked about it. We talked about it from a standpoint of learning and education. And I need to show you and teach you, and you need to be aware of, and, all these different things. and it's true. Like, I mean, I'm grateful for that. And and I think also just for it also defined, I think, safe space, right? And it does a lot of Black homes. It's like you have to deal with being the minority everywhere else, but in your safe spaces. And for Black people throughout history, most of that has been the home and the church. And so those are spaces where we get to talk about what it's like being out here with white people. But white people don't necessarily have that same. Well, let me not say. I mean, you in your case, and we're not generalizing here, but it's I do find that to be really interesting. Like it was a
Yeah.
natural conversation for us.
We did talk about it, right? Like, I mean, but it was kind of just the blanket statement. Like, this is how you approach it. You don't see color. We treat everybody the same. And then it just really didn't go any deeper than that. And it wasn't something that was really brought up a lot. It was just kind of like an understood.
Right.
And there
Right.
was really no opportunity to celebrate differences. Like I just didn't see the differences, which, like I said, sometimes, like, I don't want to treat anybody as if they're different than me, but I should acknowledge their differences. Like,
Yes.
there's a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting. I'm a travel back and then I'm gonna catch up. But when you were talking about how we don't like confront the issues anymore, I think it's because we made it frightening to have differences and to like, or for somebody to stray from one of the societal norms that often aren't spoken or discussed, but we're holding people accountable for. So when cancel culture was introduced, it really prevented like real conversations from happening because people were like, I don't know. I don't even know what will get me canceled. And not only can the conversation we're having right now get us canceled, but they traveling back. You know what I'm saying? They going back through the Twitter timeline. You know what I'm saying? They're pulling up Facebook and going back to 2005. And they're like, oh yeah, see, and this clocks because she said this when she was 17, and this clocks with what she's saying when she's 30. And so we're not allowing people to really like, you have to be able to express something so that we can lovingly redirect.
Yeah.
But I do think, the I don't see color thing, that has been like kind of like, that's kind of like the safe road that I think a lot of people took, and not just white people. Not just white people. I think a lot of people took that I don't see color, meaning one, I don't want to get canceled for saying, thinking, or doing the wrong thing. Right. And so that became the blatant statement until it started getting challenged. And people were like, no, you need to see me. This big, beautiful Black girl in front of you, you're going to see her, and you're going to recognize the richness and how I treasure it. I treasure being a Black woman, and I don't want you to not see that. But we have to get to a space. There have to be bridge builders. And I realize not everybody is called to this work. No. All right. And not everybody is called to be the person that say, hey baby. No, I want us all to have this loving relationship. But we have to allow for the bridge builders to do the work, just like we're allowing for the activists to do the work, just like we're allowing for the people who are, behind the scenes doing the work. Everybody has their place, but we make people ashamed when they're like, no, I have relationships with people across the aisle. I have conversations with people that don't look like me or think like me or, perceive the world like me. And we now, I think there's a kind of streamline that is like, yeah, you a sellout. And it's like, no, you have to have it.
Lord.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's interesting, like the bridge builder thing. Because Ruth Abigail, you were talking a little bit ago of like there was a season when like all of these people were coming out of nowhere trying to have this race conversation with you because you were the Black person that they knew. And maybe you haven't talked to them for a long time and you were having to like explain all these things. And I think it's important. It's like the bridge builders need to choose that they're going to be bridge builders.
I think that's
like
a
it
great
can't
point.
just be expected that like just because I have this Black friend that they can educate me
That's
on
good.
everything. Like it has to be this mutual, and you may even have to say, like, I suck at this, I need help. Like, acknowledging the honesty of where we both are.
Yes.
It can't just be all of this pressure on the one that, white person or black person, like, that's just too much for someone. Um,
Yeah.
You
and
you may yeah.
I think it is important, like the activists and like, there has to be a bridge builder. There has
Mhm.
to be people that are patient, that are willing to just walk slowly with people. Like, slavery was 400 years, right? And you have the argument, like, shouldn't we be over it by now? Okay, well, it
No.
was 400 years ago. So you can't just get rid of something that lasted for that long. And it's the same with the mindset of the perpetrator. Like, you can't just
Yeah.
expect people's mindsets to go away
It's
because
true.
we're done talking about it. Like, it
Right.
doesn't work that way. But you also can't force people, black or white, to be where they're not.
Mm. That's you make a great point, and I that's one of the things I had to um accept. I love what you said, like bridge builders need to choose that. I realize because of my upbringing, which is not a normal upbringing for anybody. My world was just not the same as black or white or any other race. I mean, I had a very, very unique childhood. I recognize
Mm.
that. And I also recognize that I believe God did that for a reason. Like I'm not that's not something that's not something I chose, but I choose to accept it, right?
Right.
Um and so I love what you said, and I've realized in a lot of instances, I realize that I do happen to be the black person who has more patience than other black people. And I have more
You
um
are.
I mean I know I see I feel that and I do because I understand and I love what you said. It's on both sides. Like I mean 400 years of slavery and 100 what is it, 150 years or so of Jim Crow. So we're not talking like it's very
We're
very
still on the
recent.
side of the shorter end where
It's
things are
wild
like
when you look at
shifting.
there's, you know,
Like, we're
it's truly like I
Yeah,
mean, you
they
know, and
haven't given a name to the time period we're in right now, but we're not fully there.
we're
You
not
know,
we're
yeah.
not when you look at the timeline, like you know, there are these people have done these timelines and you see, I mean, it's a not what is it 19 the voting rights act was in 1965. 1965 is when black people got the actual right to vote where they weren't they the laws of intimidation didn't outlaw the actual voting, right?
yeah, like,
65.
our parents were little.
My
Like,
mom was
we're
15.
connected to that. Yeah, like, we're connected to that generation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you can't so to your point, we can't just get rid of that just because we're done talking about it. There's no done talking about it. We still got people alive who lived it. We have to talk about it. Like
Yeah.
and but you have to opt into the conversation. And I do think and if people
And it
aren't
has to be
opting
a
in, it has to be a
conversation.
conversation.
Yeah.
It has to be a conversation which involves listening on both ends. And I think I will say, I think, and I put myself in this. There have been a lot of times that I've been involved in conversations, and it's hard for me to listen to white people. It's hard for me to hear it.
Mm.
It's hard for me to want. It's like I don't even really what you're saying right now. You don't. I don't think you realize how hard it is for me to hear this and allow you to be allow you to go through this process because it feels like such an antiquated process. Like, how could you possibly still be thinking the way you're thinking?
Mm-hmm.
But I have to
Yeah,
accept
that makes sense.
that that's how people I can't hold it against people. And I think that is it's hard for even me who has grown up in a very diverse world, who's very comfortable with any space that she's in. Like I'm not uncomfortable just about anywhere, right? I even me, it's difficult sometimes to listen to the thought process of some white folks.
Yeah.
I do it.
Mm.
I do it because I have that there's something God has put in me to be able to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard. And
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate what you said as far as you have to choose to do it, and it takes time because it's ingrained in both sides. Like there is
Mm-hmm.
unlearning to happen on both sides. And a lot of Black people struggle with that, even me, that I have to unlearn stuff too. I don't like that, because I'm like, I don't feel like I should have to unlearn. I feel like white folks should have to unlearn.
Mhm.
That's the truth.
Makes
But that's
sense.
not, you know what I'm saying? But that's not real. I do have to unlearn some stuff.
Well,
I
I
think
mean, oh, go ahead, Quita.
no, go ahead, Megan.
I don't even. It's gone.
uh,
Middle
It'll
age.
you
go.
know,
Yeah.
I think right now there's all these memes and all these conversations about how like the Black women are like, we taking time off. Okay, like don't ask us nothing because we tried and told you. Okay, but I think it's because the intersectionality of Black women in both being a Black person in America and being a woman in America, like we are so hyper vigilant and so hyper aware of everything because we are oftentimes somewhere close to the bottom of the totem pole. And
Yep.
so you
Yeah.
always have to be hyper aware of what's happening around you and above you because it's going to impact you. Whereas I
Mhm.
think for the higher you get up the pole, the less these things personally impact you. Like, and so I think when you were talking, Ruth Abigail, and you were like, listening to white people sometimes is just like, you still don't get it. Well, we have spent centuries getting it because we had to.
That's right.
Because that was the only way that we were able to stay one step ahead
Yeah.
and to take care of our families, who oftentimes we were left with, right? Because of slavery, because of what happened after slavery, because of what's still happening, right? We oftentimes are left with the children, left with the families, right? And so the protective nature in us is, all right, I need to know what's going on in you, and I need to know what's going on in the government. I need to know what's going on everywhere because it can hurt me or it can hurt the people that I'm close to. And the hypervigilance has made us very intuitive, but it has
Mhm.
also really brought us to such a higher level of stress where we are also a more vulnerable population to a lot of diseases and things because
Yep.
we're holding so much
Mhm.
just by nature of being a Black woman. And so I think that, I think when we talk about this bridge, I think a lot of Black women are saying, I've been building this bridge for a long time.
Burn out. Just burn
Yeah,
out.
and I'm
That's
burnt
real.
out, and they're like, I'm in the middle. If you want a bridge, come meet me over here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm not going past where I am right now. And honestly, I think that's fair. I think it's fair.
Mhm.
It's like y'all, we've been holding stuff on our back out here in these streets. Everybody else pick something up. Go
Yeah.
and get them bricks. Go and get them that wood over there and start building
Yeah.
because we've done a good portion of the work, and now we're like, we need to take care of ourselves because we about to.
Mhm.
Some of this has
Well,
to be relieved.
I think that we were also talking about this a little earlier too. I think there is a real thing around individualism and community. So, like, Black culture is such a rich thing. And I was saying with Abigail, like, Black people can be in a room together, and there's just like this unspoken, like, if you know, you know. And it's like everybody's just kind of on the same page, and you don't have to say it out loud. And white people, like, I have traditions and like culture within my immediate family, but I don't really have connections to anything further than that. Like, it really is, you work hard, every man for himself. Um, and so I I don't know if there's like a gap in being able to relate to certain things because that's just not as value's not the right word because I think it could be a value. It just hasn't been like a reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I think.
And it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when one thing happens to the Black community, it is like felt
By the whole community.
by the whole community.
Yeah.
And it's not to
Wow.
say that like I don't feel it. I do, but it's different.
But
Mm-hmm.
not in like a communal way.
Not in a communal way, and not in a way
Mm,
that I'm ever gonna really be able to understand.
Mm.
mm,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. I think that is a very profound. We worked like the communal aspect, like just the idea of community, the um most basic requirement of community is safety, right? And survival. And
Mhm.
because that has been the legacy of Black people in America, is safety and survival. And community, because we have to have that. We have to have community in order to survive and to feel safe. And because that has been the journey since we, since African slaves were brought to the country. That has ingrained. It's in our DNA. Like, it's not something we can, it is really interesting how it is very, I mean, that's, I had to, I mean, I think for a minute I didn't know, because I didn't grow up the way a lot of Black people, at least that I knew, did. I mean, my experiences were very different, and I had to. One of the things I had to unlearn was that my Black experiences, my Black experience wasn't valid because it wasn't the norm. And it wasn't until I got a little older that I recognized that even though it wasn't, I didn't grow up like what I saw or knew of at the time. Most Black people had grown up. My connection to the Black experience was just as deep. And this is, I couldn't have told you that. I think where it hit me, honestly, was 2016. There's a lot of, I had this moment. And, when it was when Philando Castile, I may have told you this, Meg. Yeah, I definitely told you this, because we were on the bridge. So me and Megan were on the bridge together, and the bridge protest for in 2016. And what triggered it for me, the reason I went, was because it's like a couple days before, I think it was a Thursday, Philando Castile had been killed. And it, for me, it just triggered my the realities of my brother, who there was a lot of similarities that I saw with them. And that broke me. And I remember texting Meg and our friend Brittany, and we started talking. And I can't remember who found the protest, but we found it. We ended up showing up to something. We didn't even know what it was. And we were there. And it was the first time that I had done something about, I had physically participated in activist movement because of my connection to the Black experience. Because I stopped believing that my experience was invalid because it wasn't the norm. And I was like, nah, I'm as Black as any other Black person, and I'm
Black enough. Yeah.
I'm out here, like, because I'm pissed off too, and I get to be pissed off. And and I think those are things, but it's really interesting. It took me a minute, because I had to unlearn that. Like, I had to unlearn that my experience, like all Black experiences, aren't the same, and it doesn't disqualify your Blackness. Like,
it's interesting you're saying that. That's bringing back memories for me. And I'm like, okay, so why did I go? You know? And yeah, I think there's a part of it that's like for the bigger experience, but like really it was like I wanted to be with you and Britt. Like, you guys were who were important to me.
Yep.
But like you're thinking about it as like all of these other people are important to me. But I'm like, the two people in front of me are important to me, and I want to go support them for a bigger cause, but I don't necessarily know if I was thinking about the bigger picture, which now, I'm just kind of reflecting on it as we're talking. But also, I don't even think I've told you this. Like, I was nervous the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, what am I actually doing? This is crazy, And there got to a point where I was like, I think I've hit my limit. Like, it's getting to, like when it started getting, I don't know. There was a minute where, like, I think the police and Devontae Hill were starting to do a standoff, and I was like, I don't think I can make it.
They started beating on the car that came up the
yeah. And I could look at that and be like, oh, I didn't really mean what I said, or like I could shame that. But I also think it's like, you know what? But like, I did it afraid, and I didn't know all that was going to come with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't predict how something's going to go. you can't always predict how you're going to respond in a certain situation. Because I can sit here and been like, I would have been beating on the truck with them, you know. In reality, I was like, I'm getting nervous about where this is going to go. But I do think for maybe white people that are struggling, it's like, if you are nervous, like, do it anyways.
Yeah.
Like, just do it anyways. And then process through what made you nervous.
That's really good.
Yeah.
You know, and like, if it is, maybe, like, I don't know I'm trying to think, like, maybe it is a reason that would maybe be offensive. Well, process through it anyways. Show up. Process through it anyways. And then next time you can make a better decision, and like, not necessarily better decision, but you can make the decision more purposefully.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. That's really good.
Really good.
Yeah. It's funny, and I'll say this, and then Quita, I as you were saying, like, reflecting on how you felt, like you felt nervous, I felt proud. It was I felt proud. Like
I think I felt proud too. That's fair. But I was really just like aware.
That's fair.
Like, I was just like, I can't believe I'm here. This is crazy, you know?
Well, I had that too. I mean, it was a wild experience. It was not, it was unlike any other experience I'd had, certainly up to that point. But I was like, man, like we were very green. We had never done it before. I'd never done a protest. Didn't even realize it was a protest till we started marching towards the bridge. And then we were like, we had no idea. We were so ignorant. It was crazy. We really we were dumb, really. And
we were babies.
We were.
That's so funny.
But that sense of pride was just like welling up inside of me. Like, and it's funny, I felt protected also. Because I was like, we are all here. Nothing is about to happen. If it don't happen to all of us, if it happened to one of us, it happened to all of us. And that's literally. And I think that is such a, going back to the communal thing, that's such it's a key element of how we were, how a lot of Black people, I know how I was brought up. If it happens to one, it happens to all. Like, this is a us thing. This is a we thing. Like, you know, we don't, you know, family, man, we don't talk to each other for once a year, but we ride together. Like, hey, because we here. Like, it's not, I don't have to know the intimate things about you. I just know we're connected.
Yeah. It's like, there is this connection.
It's a connection.
And I think I was saying, like, from the outside looking in, like, it's just noticeable. And it's hard to put language to it. I also think it's funny with the protest too, is some of the pictures that came out in the media made it look like some of the guys that like had the flags and like the bandanas were like super angry and like violent, but that's not what it was. It was passion. I mean, anger, right? Like righteous anger, right? But not like destructive anger, which I think is like a spin that gets put on protesters a lot. But yeah, it was just interesting because I'm like, no, nobody was destroying anything. Like, it was passion, it was purpose. And so it is funny just how our perspective would impact how we viewed that picture.
Very true.
That's interesting. This was also when I gave Ruth Abigail her new name, Ruth the Revolutionary, which I still refer to her as because that's what she is. Okay. I am a revolutionary. Okay. That is Ruth Abigail. Okay. After that moment, she became about that life. Like, she
jumped all the way in.
Yeah. Yep. And I love it. I love it. Yeah. I think, you know, Megan, you said something earlier when you were talking about how when people have, like, as a community, like when we're thinking community wise, that like you don't often think that Black people are very community oriented, and I think most minorities are, but how like those you experience things more individually rather than communally. And I remember I was in divinity school, and I remember I was talking with one of my friends. She was white, and I was talking with her, and she was like, you really have like strong allegiances to your church. Like, I was like, my church, I was like, you know, I'm going back home to be in my church, and da, da, da. She was like, I don't have that. She was like, I don't have like a strong sense of like, I got to be at this particular church. She said, I feel some ties to my denomination, but I could move. And I remember thinking, at the time, I didn't think it was a difference in race. I was like, oh, okay, faith must look differently, in some aspects. Maybe denominations, because my church was founded, like the founder is the pastor, so like we've been with her, but she comes from a bigger denomination. But I look back at it now and I'm like, I do also think that some of it is like surrounding these ideas of race, because when I think of church, I think of a safe space. I think that that's kind of like a communal understanding of church as well. For Black people, it's like, no, my church, this is my church. Like, and I have built identity here. I've built like a place here. I know how to come in here and operate. I know who the people are. I know what I'm giving, and I know what I'm getting from this space. And I think that when we talk about that fear of difference, sometimes we don't know how to communicate with each other because we don't know the value of how other people are valuing things, right? So when white people talk to us about church, right, like, you don't know all of the ways that I value that place because it's not the same. It doesn't always translate the same across those boundaries. And even when we think about things that are more social justice oriented, when a Black person is killed, or when, especially when they're killed by police, or when they're killed in an altercation that involves a white person, I don't think that it's not being the value of that to a community. Like, it's not just, a Black person died. Like, that's not the only grief point. It's that could have been my brother. That could have been my uncle. That could have been my cousin. That could have been the students that I mentor and work with. Like that, whenever I heard about a young man dying, whether they were running in the neighborhood or whether they were walking to school or walking from the gas station or whatever, immediately in my mind, I see flashes of like,
people,
students. I see my cousins. I see my dad. I see my uncle, and I'm just like, it could have very easily have been somebody that I'm close to. And it hits deep. It is not the loss of that person. It is the continued threat that it can be any one of us any day. And that we're still living underneath that veil of fear of, how do we stop this? Because it seems, because it continues to happen, and it continues to happen at such a frequency, like it hasn't died down. Like, it has moments where it seems calm, but when it picks back up, it's almost like, have we progressed any in the cycle of combating this, where we don't have to feel afraid? And even like when we were talking about how we talk about race in our homes, it's because of stuff like this that we have to, like, because like, you cannot send your children out there unaware. They don't know, you don't know what they're going to encounter when they're not with you. And so I just had that thought about, we're not experiencing things the same, but that's why it's important that you are having real conversations so that we can relearn empathy and compassion. So that, and those are the things that allow us to talk across the board. Because like Megan said, like, Megan didn't have those deep feelings of, could have been my brother, could have been this, but she said, the people in front of me, my empathy and compassion is what is connecting me to them, which is connecting me to this cause. And you'll grow as you go. You get what I'm saying? But
That's
you
right.
have to take the steps
That's right.
to make sure you are actually hearing the people who are speaking about what their experiences are.
That's right. I'm thinking a little bit too. I don't necessarily have thoughts associated to this, but it's just a thought that has come up as we're talking of just the communal aspect. And I think I see that, I don't want to say it like in such a general term, but you see a lot more of that with like American military with certain families. Like I think that's like, I'm just trying to associate it. It's like when something happens with that, it seems like there's more of a communal approach.
Yeah, like the Marines.
Of
They
being
don't play.
able, like of being able to relate to, like, if there's a fallen soldier, like there's a mass grieving that happens.
Oh,
with
that's
that.
good.
That's actually
Yeah.
really good,
Does that
Meg.
make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
No,
And
no, that's
it's just one of the, because I
Well, because
think,
it's
so many people can relate to having loved ones sent off to war, and just the experience of them returning home. Like there's a shared experience there
mm,
that I think ties people together that we don't have with Black people.
yeah.
okay. This is okay. Well, now my brain is just.
Oh, look at her. It's a going.
I've never made the connection. That is so interesting because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like even the history of the military being, being elevated at sports games, and that's a fairly new phenomenon. Like that hadn't been the case forever, but that the trauma of war
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that kind of the actual countries of the country being in war has a similar effect for I see that, right, for white families, and I'm going to say white families. I don't think I'm not excluding Black people. I'm just
It's
making
not
the comparison.
limited to
No,
just white families,
it's
but I,
not.
I think it's like one of the most tangible examples I could think of.
Well, and it's I've never
Mm-hmm.
made the connection because this idea of the trauma of war, like it's the same, right? For a lot of for most people but most Black people in America have been a part of war, right? It's been an
Mm-hmm.
internal war. It's been um a consistent, if you will, civil war, not in the sense of the historic one, but every day, right, is a fight.
Mm.
And so that's that mentality of survival of a fallen soldier, like the idea of George Floyd being a fallen soldier. That's a really powerful motif, I think.
Yeah.
And I've never made that connection, like really. And
Mm.
there is something, you think about why there's such grief and respect for the American military. It's because you have these people put their lives on the line to make sure that we're safe. And
Mhm.
I think that there is a connection and disconnection
Mm-hmm.
in the black community, right? On that front.
Mhm.
But also there's a generational divide there, because you'll talk to older Black people who have that same passion and devotion to the country for the country's sake.
Mhm.
And I'm not generalizing. I'm just based on the conversations I've had and with people of different
Mhm.
generations. Younger generations don't have the conversations I've had do not show that same devotion to the country, but devotion to my people,
or allegiance
right?
necessarily.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
allegiance to my
Mhm.
people, right? But not allegiance to the country. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And so
interesting.
Mhm.
but anyway, that I love that you made that connection. I think I've never connected. I think it's a great way to understand, like, why
Or
that
a
is
way
so deep.
to reference like empathy. Like if you're having
There you
trouble
go. Yeah.
finding empathy,
Mm,
this is a good example of like, but have you felt it with this? Well, like it's just to be able to associate. Like you can't just
that's a
force
great
empathy on
point.
someone.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
Like you
good.
can't just make
That's
someone feel
really
something
good.
they've never felt, but you have to be able to um frame it with something else. You have to be able to
Yeah.
find a common denominator somehow in order to build empathy.
Yes.
For sure.
You can
That's
have
really good.
sympathy, right?
Yeah.
Like I can sit there and be like, "Oh, I really hate that," but I don't know how that feels.
Mm.
Yeah. It also, I mean, now that I'm talking, like, it could also be like when a cop dies, you know,
Yeah,
that
that's
same
right.
kind of like that
Yep.
kind of back the blue movement,
There
right?
is a much more
Which
communal approach
mm-hmm,
with those.
yeah,
Mhm.
That's
yeah.
interesting.
And so I love that. I think and it's interesting. I love that. I think that's a really great starting point for
Mhm.
folks who might have trouble. But it's like, okay, what in you grieves when a fallen soldier, whether it's a police officer or somebody in the military, what is grieving in you and why? And then
Yep.
being able to excuse me, being able to then begin to transfer why it might feel that way for Black people
Yeah.
when, you know, when somebody who, you know, when a 25-year-old Black man is once again, you know, thrown in jail because he had a couple grams of weed, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
or has been in jail, you know, he's been in jail, you know, for 25 years for a nonviolent crime, right?
Yeah.
There is a grief there, and
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it's like, can we begin to understand where that comes from? If you can locate where it comes from for you,
Mm-hmm.
can we begin to transfer that understanding, begin to where it might be located for Black people?
And then I
Mhm.
think really think about, like, because in war, there's a clear enemy,
Mm,
right?
that's good.
And it's a clear
Interesting.
enemy that
Yeah.
you are unified against.
Mm.
Begin
Yeah,
to
that's
think
good, Quita.
about how Black people in this country feel and what sides is everybody on. I ain't gonna
Mm,
name nothing, but I want you to consider, like, really consider, like, who are Black people having to contend with, and not just Black people, minorities,
yeah.
disenfranchised people, people who come from lower income homes, socioeconomic statuses. Who are we all fighting against?
Mm,
Because there's not always a clear enemy, but sometimes it does get named. And so I think you would
mm,
understand better if you thought those things through. Like, if you take that war parallel and then be like, well, dang, who they at war with? Is it me?
mm,
Mm-hmm.
Is it this community? Is it people in power? Who's the war with? Because
mm,
there's something working against us.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we have tried to name those things. But it doesn't click until people really think through it for themselves and say, okay, I can see, like, if I had to name something, it would probably be this. And then contend with that.
that's really, I love the point of the enemy. Like, all wars have enemies. You're fighting against something.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to name the enemy, who you perceive the enemy to be. It's tough, and I think,
And
I
it
don't know.
doesn't have to be a person or an entity.
No.
A lot of it's these ideals. You know, like, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the enemy, is being encapsulated in Black men are dangerous.
Mm,
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Are that if they show up looking a certain way, talking a certain way, right? It's the ideology of that
yeah.
has been. And then I want you to think, why is that a thing? Like, why did it become a thing that Black men who wear hoodies or who are walking around at night or whatever, right? When you see different types of people doing the same things, why did that become a thing?
Mm,
What institutionalized that thing?
like,
But yeah.
yeah. And I think like, going back to this communal aspect seems to be a very core part of this
That's
conversation,
where my brain
because
is
yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
I'm not sure what my question is. I'm really processing at the moment. And so I'm not even sure if what I'm gonna say is appropriate or not, but this is safe, so we're gonna process through
Yes.
it. Um, we've talked a lot, like, there are strengths to the communal aspects, but then, like, maybe there are some weaknesses. Like, in this situation, like, could it be flopped to where um I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No.
Like,
I,
when we're
I,
trying to get to know, is it like, is the communal mind frame hindering us from being able to look at the individual in front of us? Because, like, we can group
mhm.
things together as, like, all white people, all black people, which is not necessarily wrong, but does that hinder us from being able to look at the person in front of us who may be getting, I don't know if I'm
No,
making any
No, no,
sense.
no.
no,
Yeah.
I get it. No. You're making perfect sense. I mean, I think I think this is kind of triggering, going back to a principle that I think is really important. Like, there's a difference between realities and truth. And I think
Yeah.
we like to conflate the two, right? We
Mm-hmm.
interchange this. But the reality is there's realities, like there are things that are real that we experience that are valid, and then there's truth. And truth is constant and unchanging. A reality can change. And
Yeah, that's
so when to your point, this communal the reality is we experience these things as a community because of a tainted history in this country. That's the reality.
Yeah,
The truth,
that's right.
The truth is that we are not the same. We are individuals. We do have different experiences, but our current reality doesn't the current reality doesn't always connect to the truth. And so we have to learn how to exist in both and allow for both. It is okay to admit your reality but prop up the truth. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing.
And try to find it, because sometimes like you can say things out loud and finally hear it for the first time. You know, like some stuff can live in our heads for a long time, and then when you say it, you're like, I don't actually think that's correct. Like we have to have permission to be able to find the truth within our realities.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that it's a process. It's a process. You know, I'm also thinking, like, when you talk about community, like just we obviously this conversation is about race, but I do think because we're all Jesus followers, I think it's important to also include this into the conversation
100%,
because that is also a communal experience. It is intended to be that, right? Christians, the church, Jesus followers, we exist in community. We're not supposed to exist on an individual basis. And so going back to what Queen was talking about, let me not, I don't know if I'm going to fumble that. It is a similar, I think it gets messy and muddy when you have these realities that are race-based, and then there is a connection faith-based with different races, right? There are these sometimes competing communal realities that you have to contend with in order to get to the truth, to your point, Meg, right? And I think this is part of this type of conversation is you have three people who have had different experiences in the context of race, and you also have three people who have committed themselves to a Jesus way of life.
Yep.
And those are, for a lot of people, really hard things to connect. And you know, we could do a whole nother hour on where 3 hours probably on like how muddy that is. But I didn't want to leave the conversation without
to a part 2. If you want to do a part 2,
we might need
myself for a part 2 because we've been talking
Megan.
for a minute.
We have, man. Like, I mean, we have, but I think it's been really good, and I think it's been a great entry into the conversation. That we could go on forever. We haven't touched. I mean, we just literally have just scratched the surface. Like,
no, for real.
Yeah. Like,
but this was good.
This is good.
Yeah, good start.
Good.
Yeah, great start. So Meg, thank you for being
our white friend.
Yep.
Thanks for being my black friends.
Of course. Of course.
Happy to
be so.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been good. Yeah, we might need a part 2 to it. We might need a part 2. What do you think, Quita?
We do.
I think so.
We definitely
I think
do.
we need a part 2.
Yeah, I was looking over at like our show notes, and I was like, Lord, we ain't touched.
I don't think we hit none of that.
No, we really didn't.
This is a series. Yeah, it
might be. Ooh.
Lord.
I'm down. Let's do it. Because I didn't even get to my funny story.
Oh, you didn't?
I didn't even get to my funny story.
You know, we didn't really tell a lot of stories.
We didn't tell a lot of stories.
Worth it.
Yeah.
Friends. Okay, we definitely forgot to do it at the beginning of the episode.
We always
because
do.
We always do. Okay,
we always do.
Well, hopefully you stuck around because this was a really good conversation. All right, but we want to encourage you on today to like, to share, and to subscribe.
Yes.
Okay, stop playing with us and become part of this community.
Absolutely.
Okay, don't just play on the sidelines. Get in the game.
Don't
okay,
just be,
make sure you
don't
like.
just be individuals.
Come on.
Become part of the community.
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't matter if you're black
Black
white,
or white. Come on.
Latino, okay, Asian. All right, we want all of y'all to become part of the community where we're having real conversations and unlearning together. All right. So like, share, subscribe. Send it to a friend. Hit the notification bell so you know when these episodes are coming.
Man. All right, y'all. I think that's enough for today. We will see y'all.
It is.
Let's keep unlearning together so that we can experience more freedom. Peace.
Bye, y'all.